Good evening. Welcome to the U Talk show, where he doesn't look a thing like Jesus, but he talks like a gentleman.
Why'd you stop?
Oh, because I don't want to be done for copyright infringement.
Hey, if you sing it, is it really copyright infringement?
Yeah, they could make the argument that through our aims at political outreach, we are purporting that someone else is,
Okay, I'm bunch of
you know,
legal bullshit is what you're saying. Bunch
if
of
they
legal bullshit
think that
means
we're
kind of.
using the song to suggest that these people hold our views, yeah.
That
Welcome to Union Week, everyone. We've
well,
been threatening to do it for a little while now. So it's Union Week. I've pulled up a lot of historic stuff, and Kyle has pulled in a lot of notes about the union movement in the modern day. And we would like to share our thoughts with you in the hopes of provoking you to have some thoughts. So, first cab off the rank. What are unions and what do they do? Actually, going to let
oh,
Kyle
I think
define
I
this
know
one
this one.
first. Yep.
I think I
Yep.
know this one. Okay. Unions. All right, I've written some notes here. I'm just going to look at them. They are a collection of people who come together to bargain as one group when negotiating with employers and businesses.
That is fundamentally correct.
Yes. As opposed to a marriage union. Well, not opposed to a marriage union, but you know what I mean. As
As
different from
distinct
a marriage
from.
union. Distinct. That's the word I'm looking for. Distinctively different from a marriage union, which is two people wedded in holy matrimony and so on and so forth.
Screw you.
What?
I'm getting wedded in satanic matrimony, and you cannot stop me.
Hey, satanic matrimony is just a different form of holy matrimony.
Unholy matrimony. Or holy
Mm,
matrimony, but with a negative sign before it.
I mean, if you're satanic, doesn't that kind of mean that like Satan is your god? So it is another form of holy, as you are kind of worshipping a god, but just a different one.
Mm, I guess you could say
Philosophical
so.
questions for the aged. Questions? Wow. Philosophical Christians and questions for the ages, ladies and gentlemen. Right here on the U Talk show. Anyway,
So I would like to point out that what has been described is what unions strictly speaking do. However, in the historical context, um, unions have also paradoxically prevented bloodshed by the implied threat of the possibility of bloodshed. See, back in the old days, if you had a factory foreman who was treating the workers unfairly, we'd march into the man's house and we'd beat the shit out of him in front of his family. Now, that's one way to make sure that you're not mistreated at work. Now we have collective bargaining. The idea that actions taken as a whole to benefit the workers, that is, strikes or potentially outright conflicts, uh, can be avoided simply by reminding the bosses that that threat still exists.
I mean,
You'll have heard before the concept that in unity is strength.
when you put it like that, I mean, it almost sounds kind of terrible, actually, but it's not quite that terrible.
Well, when you look at employers as hmm, having the upper hand in bargaining because they provide all the things we like. They provide job security. Allegedly, they provide things like benefits. They provide wages. Um,
Allegedly.
yeah,
I mean, if
the
you
way
can
I
call what
phrase
some
this
of
is,
today's pay wages, then sure.
yeah, it's exactly that. Having a force that exists. Oh, okay. So at the moment, I'm doing engineering statics, right? Which is forces acting on materials. And the way that we look at this, I promise this is relevant, is that we consider the sum of all forces acting on an object, and we determine that to keep the object in equilibrium, to keep it from falling over or bending or deforming or collapsing, it has to have a magical mathematical force that exactly and oppositely cancels the forces that we're placing on it.
You know what? That sounds a lot like
Consider,
society.
yeah, consider
That
that
sounds a lot like
unions are that
politics, even.
magical force. Consider that
Yeah.
unions are that magical force right
Interesting.
now, that people seek to place pressure on the workers to yield, to break, and that the unity of a workers' union, the power of the collective bargaining, is this force that exists to counter that, to give workers ideally equal power to their bosses.
Mm. I also think that it is very I'm forgetting the word, but I really should point out that 100 odd years ago, hell, not even that long, more like 80 odd years ago, with the threat of violence being a lot more real when it came to a union, there was also the threat of violence against the workers, as they'd often hire temporary armed security, which was code for a bunch of thugs to beat the shit out of any workers that got out of line. Um,
Actually, at that time, it was quite frequent that police would be employed. Actual police,
yeah,
the people
yeah,
who
there
are
was that
meant
too.
to enforce the law. And it was frequent that the police would be called to disturbances to quash worker
Hey,
uprisings.
and or even just to threaten and lock up the opponents of even certain politicians. I guess things
Mm-hmm.
haven't really changed that much after all. What's it
Staring
called?
in fixated persons unit.
That's the one. Yeah, things really haven't changed that
Yeah.
much from 100 years ago when you think about it. It's just we've been, as a society, we've been kind of what's the? It's like conditioned to value a lack of the use of force, and in my mind, everything has a time and place, and that use of force. Well, I mean, it's good when we don't need to use it, but the idea that it should be off the table has it's let employees get away with bloody murder, quite literally. So I don't know. I feel like there's a conversation to be had then, but I don't really have the fully formed thoughts in my head.
That's okay. That's okay. So we have we have this sort of sorted. What are unions and what do they do?
Hmm.
We've come at this from a very interesting angle, I think, here.
Yeah,
Unions threaten the security of employers so that the individual worker does not have to stand alone nor have the worker's security threatened.
yeah, and that can be, I mean, a lot of people like threaten the security. Those are some words that could carry certain connotations. So, what does that look like on a practical level? It's that whole idea of strength in numbers. I think Horst sort of said that earlier, but with a
Mm-hmm.
slightly different use of wording. And the idea is essentially 100 employees demanding a pay rise they have a lot more bargaining power than one or two. So
Yes. Like
that
right now,
is, yeah, because they could go on strike, and that's what threatens the security. Is 100 workers going on strike could cripple a business for the time that they go on strike. Essentially, they could be earning no profit. Now, that being
and if
said,
they have
strike isn't the
colleagues in other
first
sectors, like what we're looking at over in the US, it is impossible at this point for anyone who isn't blind or deaf to have not seen or heard something about the Writers Guild of America strikes and the fact that
screenwrite. Yeah.
SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild, and the Film, Television, Radio Association have
Mm.
joined in the strike actions.
Yeah, they're That's looking like it's going to be big and continuous. Like it's like
And who would
it's.
have thought? Who would have thought that the nanny, was going to be heading up one of those unions at this point?
I didn't. Okay, you're gonna have to tell me what that is. I
Okay, so
don't know.
Fran
I don't know what you
Drescher
talked about.
Fran Drescher, from the TV show The Nanny, played
Huh.
Fran Fine, the apocryphal nanny. Um, Smart mouth Jewish woman with like the very very New York presentation. And we all laughed at it in the 90s. We laughed at the
Wait,
collision
wait,
of
wait.
the
The
working class
nanny.
and the rich. And now we're seeing it in real time. She's out there, she is fighting for workers' rights.
Wait,
Legitimately.
The nanny. You mean the nanny like that really old TV? Well, really old, but when I was really young, it was on
Yeah.
TV and it had like almost like a 2D intro.
Yes. Yes.
Her?
That. Yeah,
She's heading
her.
up this?
Yes.
No way. Oh,
Yes
that is that
way.
is that
That is
is
beautiful.
beautiful. That's a just oh god, if I wasn't sick, that might bring a tear to my eye. It's almost doing it now. That's beautiful. But anyway, the thing
Yeah.
I was going to say something before, but I've kind of forgotten what it was. Um, it was something to do with. Oh right, I was going to say that like striking usually isn't the first option of a union. Usually they try
No.
and negotiate in good faith. The process of that is like, okay, hey, we want better benefits for our members and also their colleagues who are not our members. Um, well, most of the time, according to Australian law, I'm pretty sure that has to be the case. Um, but I'm
Yes.
but although in the US where that's not the case, you tend to have unions who will make deals that only benefit union members rather than the other workers.
Yeah, but at the
Um,
same time, in those positions, they are generally held as like union jobs, as in, if you want
yeah,
to be on that job site, you are part of the union. And that is a huge part of preserving workers' rights because it
yeah.
means that you
Well,
don't have anyone who is instantly up to speed in the event of a strike action.
yeah. I think everyone should join their union, but that's for episode 5 of this week series. Um, but there's a. I'm not sure that I think that's entirely right for reasons we might get into. But that being said, the usually it's they want to negotiate essentially on behalf of workers. Specifically in Australia, we'll just go on the assumption that it's Australian war and law. God, I'm getting incoherent right now. Apologies for that. Again, I am sick and not great. But yeah,
Yep.
essentially, usually the first step is, hey, we think the workers need a pay rise and deserve a pay rise. Let's talk about this. And there'll be a negotiation, assuming everyone acts in good faith. They come out with a deal at the other end, which is amicable for everyone.
Yes.
Now, say that doesn't happen, then usually the next step is sort of heated negotiations and you know pointing out of certain facts that may not be
Favorable.
what's the well, I mean, favorable is not the word I was looking for. It's more like uh, the recognition of which may not be desirable. Um, and so and then eventually hopefully a deal at the other end. But then after that, if the negotiations break down, that's when there tends to be a strike, and usually the negotiations only break down if one side is acting in bad faith. And in my knowledge, understanding, and experience, that is usually the business or corporation that is acting in bad faith because they want to earn maximum profit and pay their workers less. It's not
Yes.
impossible for it to be the other way around, but that is usually the way it is.
So I
Before we
actually
go,
have a case study that I think I will be referring to throughout this series. Um,
lovely, lovely.
because
If you want to,
back,
if you, we're
I
about to
just
run
want
out
to
of
give the
time, so
intro
if you
here.
want to
That's
say
fine.
anything, yeah,
So there was an independent bookstore in Newtown. There is an independent bookstore in Newtown. I believe it's still there, called Better Read Than Dead. Throughout 2021, Um, there was much union action surrounding that shop, shall we say. Um, I had the privilege of being kept in the loop on that, and it was very interesting to see. This is an independent bookstore painting itself as like an ethical bookstore trying to do the right thing by its workers, and seeing that an organized union stoppage of work um, forced the proprietors to come to the negotiating table. But I want to go through the steps there because you can't just call a strike. We have something called the Fair Work Commission in Australia, and they determine what is and isn't a protected industrial action. So there is a sort of security for employers too, to know that the employees can't strike because the managers just said, no, we can't have a shop cat. I'm allergic. There has to be a reason for industrial action to occur.
Mm.
And that's sort of what I was mainly getting to with regards to what you were saying. There is a procedure in place for all of this. We have a number of bodies that seek to make the relationship between worker and employer fair and equitable.
Yeah, although I will point out that for a long time, I'm not sure if this has changed yet. I haven't actually gone and looked at it. I probably should have, but I didn't think to until just now. Industrial action that is going on strike has
It's not
been
always going
very
on strike.
difficult. Hmm? Oh,
It's
yes,
not
but
always going on strike either.
well, true, but in relation to, well, we'll talk about all industrial action then. Essentially, a lot of industrial action is very difficult or has been very difficult to do legally, as during its time in office, if I remember correctly, the Liberal National Coalition um, essentially changed the laws to make I believe it was the criteria much more narrow, making it much more difficult for industrial action to be legal. Have I got that right, Horst? I believe that was the case.
Honestly, yes and no. Um, there were some changes to the way that protected industrial action would be considered. However, for the most part, those were changes that reflected what society actually wanted. Good job, Limnats, you dickheads.
Wait. Reflected what society actually wanted?
Yeah, yeah. For one,
Uh,
society is shockingly anti-worker, as you will realize if you have ever seen someone screaming at a poor innocent subway employee. Um, and
well, I was
two,
if
the actions undertaken with regards to the Fair Work Act were largely about rationalizing existing norms to make sure that the things that were already basically the case were written down so that future cases before the commission could be judged on merit and by largely the same standard as cases that had gone before.
you sure those were the only changes? Because I thought, and if I remember correctly, but I could very easily be wrong right now, as I'm kind of not all together right here and now. Um, I thought it was after the Royal Commission that Tony Abbott called. They made some changes then to make industrial action more difficult. Am I wrong?
Honestly, the Fair Work Act has been amended so many times. It's one of the acts that is continually evolving.
Hmm.
Because we are, as a society, continually finding a new balance between what needs to be codified into law and what is actually happening.
Okay.
But
Maybe
yeah,
we'll add in a
having had a
little
look at the Fair
slide
Work
here
Act,
detailing a
yeah,
bit of that. Yeah, maybe we'll add in a little slide here detailing a bit of that just to clarify. But for now, though, I think we've run over time. I actually forgot to set up the timer, so I'm not sure. So
it's
we'll
fine.
see
We're
you all
good.
later. Thank you for watching and have a good one.
See you all later.